Hey guys, Mark here. I hope you're doing well. In today's video, I'm going to be covering shellac in the context of rope work. So we're going to take a look how we can use shellac to benefit our rope projects. So basically, we're going to take a look at what shellac actually is. We're going to take a look at how to mix it up, how to apply it, and how it looks after we apply it. So we're going to cover as much as we can. First off, let's discuss the pronunciation. The proper way of saying it is shellac. When I started out with shellac, I called it shellac. This is because, well, intuitively, you would read it that way. We know what we're dealing with, and it is this substance, shellac. So if I during the video call it shellac, well, it is a slip of the tongue or an old habit. There are other crimes out there more serious than mispronouncing shellac. Why would you use shellac? Shellac is used as a natural way of protecting your rope projects. It acts as a primer or as a standalone protection. Usually, you would use it as a primer or undercoat and then apply some sort of a varnish over it. If we quickly take a look at how shellac is made, it is basically the product of the lag bug, which feeds on the saps of various trees, and this is what it leaves behind. This shellac is scraped off of the branches, then heated up, filtered, and this gives it this flake form. You can buy shellac in the flake form or already dissolved in alcohol. Let's take a look at the various types of shellac. The two that I have already mentioned are the flake form, which has not yet been dissolved in alcohol, and the liquid form, so the pre-dissolved shellac, which you can also purchase. Now with already dissolved shellac, so in the liquid form, you need to be careful because shellac has a limited shelf life. So after you get some liquid shellac, you're going to need to use it up in at most a year. The next two types of shellac that we know are the waxed and de-waxed shellac. The waxed version is usually more appropriate when you're only going to be using shellac for protecting your rope. The de-waxed version is more appropriate as a primer, so as an undercoat, because it doesn't interfere with the second coat. Wax can make things a bit difficult when applying the second coat, so the de-waxed version is more appropriate. We also know quite a few colors of shellac, so we can divide shellac by the color. Usually, shellac is of a light color, yellow, transparent, orange, or maybe even reddish. These are the colors that you can use. You can also mix them up as much as you like. The color of shellac is basically determined by the type of a sap, so the species of tree that the lag bug fed upon, as well as the time of harvesting for the shellac. So the time of harvest plus the type of sap determines the color of shellac. Before we begin mixing and applying shellac, a few additional notes. First off, shellac is dissolved in alcohol. As such, you will want to mix it up as well as apply it in a well-ventilated spot. Perhaps keep the doors and windows open, or perhaps do it outside. Secondly, because dissolved shellac is alcohol-based, you can do several coats. As such, you can keep the mixture fairly thin and apply several coatings to get the desired effect. And thirdly, because shellac has limited shelf life after it has been dissolved, it is a good idea to just mix up enough for your project. Keep the rest in flake form. When mixing shellac, the first thing that you're going to notice is that you're combining a solid, so the flakes, and a liquid, so the alcohol. As such, this brings a certain challenge on our hands. On one hand, shellac is going to be measured by weighing it either in ounces or grams. Liquids, such as our alcohol, is measured in volume, so we're going to use fluid ounces or milliliters. So, two different measurements for two different substances. So the tools for measuring are going to be a kitchen scale for weighing the weight of the flakes, and for the alcohol, we're going to be using a cup which has either fluid ounces or milliliters printed for measuring the volume of the alcohol. First off, let's take a look at the traditional way of mixing shellac. This way is nowadays mostly used in woodworking, but you can apply it to rope work as well. Basically, what we do is a cut. We have a fixed amount of alcohol, traditionally a gallon of alcohol, and into that gallon we mix up a certain amount of shellac. For a 1 pound cut, we add in 1 pound of flakes into a gallon of alcohol. For a 2 pound cut, we add in 2 pounds of shellac flakes into that gallon of alcohol. And for a 3 pound cut, we add in 3 pounds of flakes into a gallon of alcohol. So basically, the more shellac flakes that we add in, the thicker our mixture is going to be. In woodworking, the most common or the starting point is the 2 pound cut. Now naturally, this way of mixing shellac needs to be scaled down. You're not going to mix 3 gallons of alcohol with a pound or 3 pounds of flakes. This would be very expensive, and usually you're not going to be using all that much shellac. So you scale it down to something more manageable. So now that I explained the traditional way of mixing shellac, let me show you how I do it in a simpler way. So first off, you're going to estimate the amount of shellac that you're going to need for your project. So for example, this small cross here is not going to need a whole jar of shellac. Something smaller is going to do. So once you know how much you're going to need, we need to mix it up. In the following segment, I'm going to show you 2 ratios which I use in practice. The first ratio is 50-50. In this one, we mix half alcohol and half shellac flakes. This gives you a thick mixture which you can then later on dilute if needed. So a 50-50 mix. Now you can eyeball this and mark down the middle point. Somewhere around here, add half alcohol and then half flakes to fill out the entire jar. If you want an accurate 50-50 mix, this is how you do it. You take a smaller cup and you use it to fill half of your jar with water. Remember to count the number of cups that you're going to pour in. So let's say that this is half of the mixture that we're going to make. Mark down the middle point. Then add exactly the same number of cups. So I added 4 to get to this point, and I'm going to add 4 more. At this point, after adding the same number of cups, I'm going to mark the top position. So basically, what I know now is that I need to fill 50% or half of the jar up to this point with alcohol, then add in enough flakes so that the alcohol level rises up to this point. So the top point. And this way you can get an accurate mixture of flakes to alcohol. The second ratio is very common. It is to use 2 parts alcohol and then 1 part shellac flakes. So 2/3 alcohol, 1/3 shellac flakes. It is not as potent as the previous mix, but well, you can just do several coatings to get a similar result. And again, just like in the previous ratio, you can use water to determine the exact proportions for your alcohol and flakes. So again, you take a cup and you fill the first third of the jar using water. Then mark down the first third. Then add the same number of cups to get to the second third. So this is the level up to which you're going to fill your alcohol. So 2/3. Then add in another set of cups, again the same amount, to get the top point. And you now know the top point. And you're going to fill this volume, so from 2/3 up to the top point, with shellac flakes, which is going to raise the level of alcohol. So now that we have covered the basics, let's mix some shellac. I'm going to be covering this small rope project using a couple of coats of shellac. For this, I'm only going to mix up a small batch. The container that you're going to use needs to have a cap so that the alcohol doesn't run away from you. First off, we're going to add in the alcohol. I have marked the position up to which I'm going to fill the alcohol into my container. As far as the alcohol goes, it is usually sold right next to the shellac flakes. So usually you're going to find it on the same shelf. Now, since alcohol evaporates and it's not the best thing for you, I highly recommend that you do this outside or in a well-ventilated spot. So what we're going to do is first pour in the alcohol. The second piece of the puzzle is the shellac. Now you can simply throw in the flakes into the alcohol in this form, or you can choose to crush the flakes into a fine powder. The powder form dissolves much faster since it has a bigger surface, but well, if you do have the patience to wait, you can just use the flakes. So how long should you leave shellac in order for it to dissolve? Some people say 24 hours. In my experience, it's not as long as that. Now, shellac is going to basically dissolve quite fast, but at the bottom, usually, this kind of a goo is going to form. So here, the flakes are quite densely packed. In order to speed up the dissolvement process, you can shake the shellac and you can stir it in order to speed up the process. Now generally, shellac is going to be ready when all of the flakes become liquid. So the alcohol and shellac mix up and there are no solid particles in your shellac. After dissolving the shellac, it is time to apply it onto a rope project. Protect your table by using some sort of a pad or protection. Take a brush, which I recommend that you dedicate to shellac only. Then simply paint on a coat of shellac over the rope project. Then simply let it dry and maybe apply a second coat over the first one if the first one doesn't feel quite right. Finally, here you can see the before and after versions of this cross key fob. They are both tied out of the same cotton cord, this one without the shellac and this one after the shellacking process. So you can definitely notice a difference. Now the color change is dependent upon how much shellac you use, how thick of a shellac you use, plus the initial color of shellac flakes. As I've mentioned, the source of shellac, so the type of tree that the lag bug fed upon, is going to determine the color of the shellac. So you can also use shellac not only to protect your projects, but also to get some color onto them. After applying the shellac, you can also notice, besides the color change, that the project looks glossier and it is stiffer to the touch. So it looks a lot more like a finished product. So guys, at this point, I would like to thank you very much for joining me in this short introduction into using shellac. I hope to see you next time.